Madam President, no one wants to live on a dirty planet. Before we created the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, nearly 50 years ago, rivers actually caught fire from pollution. Smog covered our cities, and power plants spewed arsenic and mercury into the sky with impunity. In the years since, the EPA has been at the vanguard of the effort to protect the air we breathe and the water we drink. This work is not easy, and the person who leads the EPA has a tough job. It requires toughness and fortitude to fight back against polluters and special interests. But in all the years the EPA has been around, we would be hard-pressed to find someone more hostile to the agency's fundamental mission or is less suited to leading it than Scott Pruitt is. As Oklahoma's Attorney General, Mr. Pruitt organized, led, or participated in virtually every challenge to the EPA's work during his time in office. His lawsuits have, among other things, sought to prevent the EPA from enforcing rules that keep our water safe, protect our air from harmful pollutants like mercury and arsenic, and limit the carbon pollution that causes climate change. These lawsuits beg the question, does Scott Pruitt believe the EPA should even exist? In the weeks and months since he was nominated, Mr. Pruitt has gone out of his way to try and smooth over his record and say what he thinks we want to hear. But we can't fall for it. Instead of listening to what he's saying now, let's examine more closely what he's done as Oklahoma's Attorney General. His record is troubling. Throughout his term of office, Mr. Pruitt has been very cozy with fossil fuel companies and affiliated interest groups. A 2014 investigation by the New York Times revealed that energy lobbyists drafted letters for Mr. Pruitt to send on state stationery to the EPA against the Obama administration's environmental regulations. The CEO of Continental Energy, an oil and gas company based in Oklahoma, served as the campaign chairman for his reelection bid. And we just got word yesterday that a state district judge in Oklahoma ordered the Attorney General's office to turn over as many as 3,000 documents related to Mr. Pruitt's communications with oil, gas, and coal groups during his time in office. Unfortunately, we won't get a chance to see what these documents reveal before voting on his confirmation. Based on his record and associations, however, I think we can make an educated guess that these documents will reveal the extent of Mr. Pruitt's ties to fossil fuel interests. And we have no reason to believe he will renounce these connections if confirmed to serve as EPA administrator. He also fought relentlessly against the EPA's efforts to establish basic limits on smog, arsenic, mercury, and other dangerous air pollutants. Mr. Pruitt, for example, sued the EPA not once, but twice to overturn the mercury and air toxic standards. These standards would prevent 40,000 pounds of mercury emissions every year and would help keep our food supply safe from contamination. Mr. Pruitt has also repeatedly questioned whether climate change is real. In an op-ed in the Washington Times, Mr. Pruitt refused to accept settled science that humans contribute to climate change. He said there are, and I quote, a wide range of viewpoints regarding the extent to which man contributes to climate change, end quote. In National Review, Mr. Pruitt said, I quote, scientists continue to disagree about the degree and extent of global warming, end quote. The fact is, 97% of scientists agree that climate change is real and that human beings contribute to it. I hardly think 97% of scientists agreeing constitutes a wide range of viewpoints on climate change and man's responsibility for it. From his perch at Oklahoma's Attorney General, Mr. Pruitt sued to prevent President Obama's Clean Power Plan to cut carbon emissions from taking effect. He argued that the federal government doesn't have the authority to regulate carbon emissions. This is wrong. The Supreme Court ruled twice, first in Massachusetts v. EPA in 2007, and again in Utility Air Regulatory Group v. EPA in 2014, that the EPA has the authority to regulate carbon emissions as pollution under the Clean Air Act. If confirmed, Mr. Pruitt has promised to kill the Clean Power Plan and undo much of the positive work President Obama did to address climate change. Mr. Pruitt also has a track record of undermining enforcement of environmental laws and regulations. Shortly after becoming Oklahoma's Attorney General in 2010, Mr. Pruitt gave us a taste of what's to come at the EPA when he eliminated the Environmental Protection Unit within the Oklahoma Attorney General's office. For years, this unit investigated water contamination from refineries, lead paint waste, and illegal dumping. In its place, he created the innocuous-sounding Federalism Unit. Unlike the unit he eliminated, whose mission was to protect the health and safety of Oklahomans, the Federalism Unit's job is to handle all of Mr. Pruitt's legal challenges against the EPA. Over the past 3 years, Mr. Pruitt has increased the budget of the Federalism Unit by over 700%, and the taxpayers of Oklahoma get to foot that bill. Mr. Pruitt's record paints a clear picture. His priorities directly conflict with the EPA's mission to protect public health and the environment. He is much more concerned about protecting corporate interests than keeping our communities healthy and safe from pollution. Over the past few months, I have heard from thousands of my constituents who have urged me to oppose Mr. Pruitt's nomination. I would like to read 2 of the letters I've received. Georgia is a PhD student at the University of Hawaii. She wrote, quote, I strongly oppose Scott Pruitt's confirmation as EPA administrator. Mr. Pruitt is a climate change denier who has actively worked against the mission of the agency. As a PhD student in science, I know we need an EPA administrator that respects science and supports clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. Pruitt is the wrong choice for our nation and must be rejected, end quote. Keiko from Kaneohe also wrote to explain what this fight means to her. Quote, this is not a bipartisan issue, but it is as much an American issue as it is a Hawaiian issue, a human issue, and an issue of all inhabitants of Papa, Mother Earth. I ask that you continue to be vigilant and onipa'a in the face of climate change deniers. Mahalo for looking out for everyone living today and going to be born tomorrow, end quote. We've come too far over the past 8 years to let someone like Scott Pruitt destroy the progress we've made. I urge my colleagues to oppose this nomination. I yield the floor.